Everyone's heard of Darwin, right? The father of the theory of evolution. The man that came up with the idea that humans evolved from apes over thousands of years. But Darwin didn't just start out studying man. He started with something much smaller. Birds. More specifically, finches in the Galapagos Islands. There are about 14 different species of finches on the islands today, all extremely unique and different. But the Galapagos, millions of years ago, did not have finches. Then, how did they get them, and how are they all so different? This is the story. A few million years ago, a flock of migrating birds off the coast of South America was blown off course by a large storm. These birds were lucky, though, and found what we now call the Galapagos Islands, off the coast of Ecuador. These birds were either a flock of blue-black grassquits or the St. Lucia blackfinches, which look very similar despite the color differences. These birds were new to the islands. They weren't used to their new conditions yet, and so natural selection took place, where the birds that had certain abilities to obtain food and survive lived to reproduce and pass their genes on. The birds that couldn't find a way to eat, well, died. Now, this didn't happen overnight. This happened over thousands of years, each generation slightly mutated, until now, when the difference between the species is and are quite clear. Some of these species being the large ground finch, the common cactus finch, the sharp-beaked finch, and the woodpecker finch, here of which will be explained. The large ground finch will be first, one of the more generic finches. They will get more interesting as we move from finch to finch. Found in most of the major islands, it is the largest of the Darwin's finches, weighing about 35 grams. The large ground finches evolved to have the broadest beak, having the ability to eat the larger, harder-to-crack seeds on the ground that are not as accessible to the smaller finches with the smaller beaks. This is probably because the island that it first landed on had plants that produced bigger seeds than other islands, causing the birds with bigger beaks to survive, and the smaller-beaked birds to either die or find another food source on a different island. The next finch is called the common cactus finch. It feeds on the nectar and pollen of the Opuntia cacti, making it one of the few birds that can. This is one of the more well-known birds, hence the name common. These birds have evolved to have a long and pointy beak, allowing them to reach in and get at the nectar and pollen of the cacti. I believe that since this bird feeds on something as unusual as a cactus, that either the competition for food in the early days was fierce, or that the other food sources simply didn't exist, and this bird was forced to eat the cacti, the food that no other animal wanted. This bird is found on each island where it is dry and arid, the region where the Opuntia cactus is found. Now on to the next finch, the sharp-beaked ground finch, also called the vampire finch. Known and nicknamed for its extreme eating habits of drinking other animals' blood, it is quite the specimen. On some low-lying and arid islands, it will eat mostly seeds, not living up to its name. Now, when we go over to the islands of Wolf, Darwin, and Genovesa, this is where the bird will strike. With its long and pointy beak, it will usually prey on larger birds, such as the blue-footed boobies, by pecking at their feather shafts until the blood starts to flow, then drinking the blood. These birds will also feed on the eggs of seabirds and on other islands, small invertebrates. The last finch I will talk about is, in my opinion, the most fascinating, the woodpecker finch. Found on quite a few different islands, this bird has adapted to use tools, like twigs or cactus spines, to stab and push its prey out of holes to eat. Its diet usually consisting of insects, spiders, and spider egg sacs. The woodpecker finch will usually use this technique during the arid region's dry season, when prey is limited because of the time it takes to use this method. During the wet season, however, this bird will simply use its pointy beak to forage through moss and bark when prey is more abundant. I believe that this bird and its species would starve during the dry season, with the only insects available living in the crevices of trees, the birds having to resort to using tools to eat enough to survive, and the trait passing down through the generations. Darwin was right in every way about his theory on evolution, and these finches are the best way to prove it. Only one type of finch came over from the coast of South America, And now they have branched off into several different species, each fascinating and remarkable in their own way. From evolving to crack bigger seeds on the ground to using tools to stab insects, Darwin's finches are some of the most remarkable and fascinating creatures alive and are simply evolution at its finest.